The sun was low over the tall white towers of Arendor. Its golden light touched the marble walls, making them shine like fire. But for the humans below, there was no warmth in that light, only chains. Kayla moved through the palace yard with quiet steps, holding a silver tray in both hands. Her back ached, and her feet were sore, but she kept her head down. She wore the plain gray robe of a servant, and around her neck was a thin collar of gold. It looked beautiful, but it was not. It was a mark of ownership. She passed a group of elven nobles who laughed as they watched two humans scrub the stone floor. One of them slipped on wet soap, and the elves laughed louder. Kayla felt her jaw tighten. She wanted to speak, to shout, but she said nothing. Her mother had once told her, "Survive first, speak later." As Kayla entered the grand hall, a loud voice called out, "You there, girl, come here." She turned and saw Lord Cillian, a high elf with pale hair and cold eyes. He sat lazily on a carved seat, surrounded by soft cushions. She walked over and knelt, holding out the tray. He reached for a red fruit but stopped, looking at her face. "Too bold," he said with a sneer. "You look like you still have fight in you. We should fix that." Before she could react, he slapped the tray from her hands. It clattered to the floor, fruit rolling across the smooth stone. Kayla stared at the mess, her hands trembling. Behind her, more elves laughed. "Pick it up," Lord Cillian said, standing. Kayla knelt slowly. Her hands closed around a bruised apple. She said nothing, but inside her heart, something burned. Just as she reached for the last fruit, a horn sounded outside. Not a signal of war, but one of ceremony. "The champion arrives," someone whispered. The crowd moved toward the great gates. Kayla followed, curious. In the center of the palace yard, guards stepped aside to reveal a tall figure in dark armor. He wore a mask of iron, and his arms were marked with old scars. "A human," someone said in shock. The champion raised his head. "I am Work," he said. "I fight today in trial-like combat." Lord Cillian stepped forward. "Against who?" A guard pulled Kayla from the crowd. "This one." She raised her hand to a noble. Gasps filled the air. Kayla looked around. She had bitten no one, but she had refused to bow that morning. Someone must have lied. "She's no fighter," Cillian laughed. Rourke looked at Kayla for a long time, then he turned back to Cillian. "Then I fight for her." The yard fell silent. Kayla stared at the strange warrior, confused and afraid. "Why would you fight for me?" she asked. Rourke leaned down and whispered, so only she could hear. "Because your fire has not gone out yet." The forest outside Verender was quiet, but it was not safe. Kayla followed close behind Rourke as they moved through thick trees and fallen leaves. He didn't speak much, and when he did, it was short and careful. They had escaped the palace under the cover of night, slipping past guards and walls like shadows. Her feet were blistered, and her hands still shook, but she kept moving. She didn't know where they were going, only that they could not go back. After many hours, they reached a hidden valley where trees grew so close, even the sunlight had trouble getting through. "We're here," Rourke said. Kayla looked around. Broken stones and moss-covered statues filled the clearing. She saw shapes carved into old stone, humans in armor, holding swords high. "This was once a city," Rourke said. "Long ago, before the elves came." Kayla knelt beside a cracked wall and touched the carvings. It felt strange, like something deep inside her remembered this place, even if her mind did not. A voice called out from the trees. "You brought her." A group of humans stepped into view. Some were young, others older. All wore patched clothes and carried simple weapons. "She's the girl?" one of them asked. "The one the champion saved?" Rourke nodded. "She's more than that." He led them into a cave behind the ruins. Inside, a fire crackled. On the ground, a piece of leather was stretched out, burned and faded. Rourke knelt beside it and unrolled it carefully. "This is what's left of the old map," he said. "Before the elves burned our history, before they took our names." Kayla leaned in. The map showed mountains, rivers, and a single mark in red. "What's there?" she asked. "A temple," Rourke said, "hidden for centuries. It holds something the elves fear, something they tried to erase." An old woman near the fire coughed. "The ether heart," she said. "Not a weapon. A memory. A light the elves can't steal." Kayla looked at Rourke. "You think it can help us?" "I don't think," he said. "I know." They sat in silence. Outside, wind howled through the trees. Later that night, a warning horn blew. "Elves," someone shouted. "They found us." Flames rose at the edge of the valley. Kayla grabbed a small blade from the cave wall. It was chipped and old, but it felt right in her hand. As others ran to fight, Kayla helped a small boy escape through a side path. A burning tree fell in their way. Without thinking, Kayla raised the blade. It glowed for a second, just a flash, and the flames parted long enough for them to pass. The old woman saw it happen. Her eyes wide, she whispered, "She has the mark." Kayla didn't hear her. She was already running into the night, the broken blade in her hand, and fire at her back. The wind carried smoke as dawn broke over the valley. Fire still burned in the trees behind them. Kayla walked beside Work, both silent and tired. They had lost people during the night attack. Not everyone made it out. They moved with the others, heading north through rocky hills. Work said the old temple was near, hidden in the cliffs beyond the dead river. Kayla kept the broken blade at her side. It no longer glowed, but she felt its weight, strange and steady. Far behind them, deep in the heart of Erendur, Prince Valier stood in a high tower. His silver cloak hung still as he watched the smoke from the mountains. Beside him stood the Seeker Knights, tall and still, with armor that hummed softly. "The humans grow bold," Valier said. "They forget their place." One of the Seekers spoke, its voice sharp like glass. "Shall we burn the rest?" "Not yet," Valier said. "I want the girl brought to me, the one with the light. She will kneel or she will scream." He turned and walked from the window, his eyes cold with pride. Back in the hills, Kayla and Work reached a high ridge where they could see the ruins of an old tower. It was broken and half buried, but the ground nearby was shaped with stone paths and worn steps. "This is part of it," Work said. "The temple's lower halls are underneath." Kayla looked at the entrance. Her hands shook. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else. Before they could move forward, an arrow flew from the trees. It hit Work in the arm, knocking him back. "Ambush!" someone shouted. Elves burst from the rocks, dressed in green and gold. They moved fast and silent. Kayla pulled her blade. It was still dull, but she stood her ground. Rourke fought through the pain, cutting down 2 elves with his short sword. Kayla ducked behind a stone wall, pulling Rourke with her. Blood ran down his arm. "The arrow," Rourke said, breathing hard. "It's poisoned." Kayla tore part of her sleeve and pressed it against the wound. Rourke's face grew pale. The elves closed in. Kayla looked at Rourke, then down at the blade. She stepped out into the open. "Come on," she shouted. They came at her with speed, but just as they reached her, the blade flickered again. A wave of force knocked 2 elves off their feet. Kayla stood firm, the blade humming in her hand. The other humans rallied, pushing the elves back. One by one, the attackers fell or fled into the trees. When the fight ended, Kayla ran to Rourke. His eyes were closed, his breathing weak. An elder knelt beside her, checking the wound. "Soul root poison," he said. "We need to find the temple now. Only old magic can save him." Kayla looked at the broken tower and the path beyond. The Etherheart was close. She could feel it. And they were out of time. The journey to the temple was harder than Kayla had imagined. The path was narrow and steep, winding up the cliffs as the sun began to set. She carried Rourke on her back, his weight heavy but not unbearable. His breathing was slow and his pulse weak. Every few steps, she paused to check on him, but his eyes remained closed, and he didn't speak. The temple, hidden deep in the mountains, was a place of strange power. The air felt different here, thicker, as if something ancient and alive had once lived in the stones. The entrance to the temple was carved into the side of the cliff, a large doorway flanked by 2 stone statues. Their faces were worn, almost unrecognizable, but their eyes seemed to follow Kayla as she passed. The ground inside the temple was cold and smooth. Faint carvings covered the walls, twisting in patterns Kayla didn't understand. At the far end of the hall stood a stone altar, and above it, a faint glow pulsed in the darkness. "Is this it?" Kayla asked, her voice barely a whisper. The elder, who had followed them from the camp, nodded slowly. "This is where the Aetherheart sleeps," he said. "Only the worthy can awaken it, and only those with true fire in their hearts can wield its power." Kayla stepped forward, unsure of what to do. She placed Work gently on the ground and looked at the glowing object on the altar. It was round, glowing softly with a light that shifted from blue to white to gold. The light seemed to hum, as if it was alive, calling to her. The elder stepped back. "Touch it," he said, "but be careful. The Aetherheart chooses its own." Kayla hesitated. She didn't feel worthy. She was just a servant, just a girl who had fought to survive. But she had already come so far, and Work was dying. Taking a deep breath, Kayla reached out and placed her hand on the Aetherheart. The moment her fingers touched the glowing surface, a rush of energy filled her. It was warm at first, then burning, and her vision blurred. Memories she didn't recognize flooded her mind. Memories of battles fought long before she was born, of kings and queens who had fallen to the elves. She saw a world full of light and fire, of humans standing strong against their enemies. The glow around the Aether heart brightened, and the temple seemed to come alive. The ground trembled beneath her feet as the walls shifted, revealing new carvings. The pulse of the light grew stronger, and Kayla felt it fill her, filling the empty spaces inside her with strength, with power. Suddenly, she felt the poison in Rourke's body. It was strong, dark, spreading through him like a shadow. Without thinking, Kayla turned toward him. She raised her hand, and the light from the Aether heart swirled around her, moving toward Rourke. The poison hissed and burned, but the light pushed it away, as if the darkness was nothing against its strength. Rourke's body twitched, and then he opened his eyes. The poison was gone. Kayla staggered back, exhausted. Rourke sat up, his hand going to his arm where the poison had been. He looked at Kayla, and for the first time, there was no pain in his eyes, only gratitude. "You did it," he whispered. Kayla's hand still tingled with the power of the Aether heart. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew one thing. The fight had only just begun. The night air was thick with smoke as the humans gathered at the base of the broken gate. The stone walls rose high in front of them, dark and broken from years of neglect. But it still stood strong, a symbol of the Elven Empire's power. And tonight they would strike. Kayla stood at the front of the group, her fingers wrapped tightly around the hilt of her blade. The Aether heart was still with her, hidden beneath her cloak. Its power pulsed faintly, as if it knew the battle was near. Beside her, Rourke was fully recovered, his movements steady and sharp. The poison was gone, and the strength he had lost was slowly returning. "Tonight we fight," Rourke said, his voice low but firm. "We take the gate, and we make the elves know that they are not the only ones with power." Kayla nodded, but her heart was heavy. They had come this far, and yet the road ahead was still uncertain. The elves were not like the humans. They were fast, strong, and their magic was old and deadly. Kayla had seen it before, in the way they moved with such ease, their swords cutting through the air like whispers of death. The plan was simple. Rourke's warriors would attack the front, drawing the elven soldiers out. Kayla and a few others would sneak around the side, using the shadows to reach the gates. Once they were inside, they would disable the defense systems and open the gates for the rest of the army. As the first arrows flew from the walls above, the battle began. The sounds of shouting and steel clashing filled the air. Kayla ducked behind a pile of rubble, her breath coming fast. She could hear the thrum of elven bows, the crack of arrows hitting the stone. Rourke's warriors moved quickly, cutting down the first few defenders, but the elves were not easily beaten. They were like shadows, slipping through the darkness with deadly grace. Kayla moved when she saw her chance, darting between broken walls and fallen pillars. She stayed close to the ground, keeping her steps light. The blade in her hand felt heavier than before, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Too many lives depended on this. She reached the side of the gate and found the hidden lever that would open it. Her fingers slid over the cold metal, but before she could pull it, a figure appeared in the doorway. An elven soldier, his eyes burning with anger. "You think you can defeat us?" he hissed, raising his sword. Kayla barely had time to react. She stepped back, raising her blade in defense. The elf swung, and she barely dodged in time. The sword missed her by inches, cutting through the air with a sharp whistle. She swung back, her blade catching the soldier's arm. He staggered, and Kayla took the chance. With a quick strike, she disarmed him and sent him crashing to the ground. Without waiting, she pulled the lever. The gates groaned, then began to open. The sounds of battle outside grew louder as the rest of the human warriors surged forward, flooding the courtyard. The elves had been caught off guard. But Kayla knew this was just the beginning. There would be more battles, more bloodshed, and they would fight because they had no choice. Their survival depended on it. The battle raged on through the night, the air thick with smoke and the sounds of clashing swords. The humans had breached the gates, and the elven defenders were scrambling to stop them. But the tide was turning, and for the first time in years, the humans were pushing back. Kayla fought alongside Rourke and the others, moving quickly between the columns and walls of the broken gate. Her blade felt light in her hands now, its power from the Aether heart flowing through her. It wasn't just the blade. It was her too. The fire inside her was stronger than it had ever been. She could feel the weight of her people's past and the power of what they could become. They weren't just slaves anymore. They were fighters. Suddenly, a loud horn echoed through the chaos. Kayla paused, looking toward the source. Through the smoke and dust, a figure appeared, tall and regal. Prince Valier, the one who had ordered the humans to be hunted, stood at the center of the battlefield. His silver armor gleamed in the dim light, and his eyes burned with cold fury. "Enough," he shouted, his voice carrying over the noise of battle. "This ends now." The elves in the field hesitated, their movements faltering as they looked to their prince. Prince Valier raised his hand, and a silence fell over the battlefield. The humans stopped, watching in confusion. "You think you can fight us?" Prince Valier called out to the humans. "You think you can break the chains we have built for centuries?" Kayla stepped forward, her eyes locked on the prince. She could feel the heat rising in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "We already have," she said, her voice steady. "Your chains are broken." The prince's gaze shifted to Kayla, his eyes narrowing. He motioned to one of his captains. "Bring her to me." Kayla didn't move. She felt the Aetherheart's power stir inside her, its light pulsing softly in the depths of her cloak. She didn't need to be afraid. The prince could command his soldiers, but they were no longer the ones in control. The humans had power now. Rourke stepped forward, his hand on Kayla's shoulder. "Let him come," he said. "We will face him." Prince Valier's lips curled into a smile. "Very well. If you wish to die, then I will grant your wish." He raised his hand, and in an instant, the air around him seemed to crackle with energy. A barrier of magic surrounded him, and a wave of force rippled through the battlefield. The elves' eyes glowed with the same cold power as their prince. Kayla felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. She reached for the blade at her side, but before she could move, Rourke spoke. "Wait," he said, his voice calm. "This is our fight, not just yours." Kayla looked at him, understanding in his eyes. They would face the prince together. The humans would not bow down to the elves anymore. They had come too far, and they would not be stopped now. Not by fear, not by magic, and not by any prince. "Let's finish this," Kayla said, her voice full of determination. The final battle was about to begin. The ground beneath Kayla's feet trembled as Prince Valier stepped forward. His silver armor gleamed like a shadow in the smoke-filled air. His face was stern, his eyes burning with cold fire, and the power around him seemed to crackle like lightning. Kayla could feel the Aetherheart's energy still flowing through her, but the prince's magic was old, ancient. The weight of his power pressed down on her, heavy and oppressive. He was no ordinary elven ruler. He was the first among them, the one who had been born with the ability to command the very forces of nature. "You think your rebellion can stand against centuries of power?" Valier's voice was like ice. It echoed through the battlefield, reaching both elves and humans alike. Kayla tightened her grip on her blade. Rourke stood beside her, his face hard and focused. The rest of the human warriors had gathered behind them, their eyes watching the prince, waiting for their chance. "We're not afraid of you anymore," Kayla said, her voice steady. "We've broken your chains, and we're taking back our land." The prince's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You speak of freedom, but what do you truly know of it? You are nothing but tools, humans, tools to be used, broken, and cast aside." With a sudden motion, Prince Valier raised his hand. The air around him shimmered with energy, and a gust of wind knocked several humans off their feet. The elves behind him drew their weapons, ready to strike. "Let's see if your courage can save you," the prince sneered. Then with a snap of his fingers, the elves charged. Kayla reacted instinctively. She ran forward, blade raised. The magic of the Aetherheart surged within her, giving her strength. She could feel the light of the heart coursing through her veins, filling her with warmth and power. This time she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone. The elves were fast. They moved like shadows, their blades cutting through the air with deadly precision. Kayla blocked one strike, then another, her blade ringing as it met the sharp edges of elven steel. She twisted, ducking under a swing, and struck back with a quick slash. Her blade found its mark, and one elf fell to the ground. Rourke fought beside her, his sword a blur of motion. Together, they cut through the elven ranks. But for every elf that fell, two more took their place. The prince's magic filled the air, making the battle feel like an impossible struggle. As they fought, Kayla noticed something. Despite his power, Prince Valier was not as invincible as he appeared. His magic required concentration, and every time he called on it, his focus wavered for a brief moment. Rourke saw it too. "Now," he said, his voice low but fierce. Kayla nodded. She turned to face the prince, her eyes locking onto him. This was their moment. They had to take down the leader, or the elves would never stop. They had to make him see that the humans were not weak, they were strong, and they would not be slaves any longer. With a battle cry, Kayla sprinted toward the prince. The Etherheart's power surged through her, pushing her faster, stronger. She raised her blade high, ready to strike down the one who had caused so much pain for her people. The prince's eyes widened as he saw her coming, but he was not fast enough. The final blow was about to land. Keela's heart pounded as she charged toward Prince Failure. The Etherheart's power was with her, its light blazing through her veins, making her faster, stronger, more determined than ever. She could see the fear in the prince's eyes for the first time. He had never imagined that humans would rise against him like this. The elven soldiers tried to stop her, but she cut through them with swift, precise strikes. Her blade was alive with power, and each swing sent an elven warrior falling to the ground. But Kayla didn't pause to look back. She had one goal: reach the prince. He raised his hand again, and a wave of magic surged toward her. The air crackled with the energy of it, threatening to knock her off her feet. But Kayla kept running, her focus locked onto the prince. The Etherheart's magic wrapped around her, protecting her from the worst of the blast. With a roar, she dove under the magic and closed the distance. The prince barely had time to react before she was upon him. She swung her blade upward, and he raised his hand to block, but it was too late. The Etherheart's power surged through the blade, and with a sharp crack, it cut through the prince's defense. His eyes widened in shock as the blade struck his side. For a moment, there was silence. Then the prince fell to his knees, his hand clutching his wound. "No," he whispered, looking up at Kayla with disbelief in his eyes. "This cannot be." Kayla stood over him, her blade still raised. The Etherheart's glow pulsed brighter in her hand, and for a moment, the battlefield seemed to pause. The elves stopped fighting, watching their prince fall from his high throne. The humans stood still, unsure of what would happen next. The prince gasped for breath, his magic weakening as his life force drained away. You were never supposed to rise." Kayla's heart was steady, but her mind was filled with the weight of what she had just done. She had struck down the one who had ruled over her people for so long, but it was not an act of hate. It was an act of survival, of justice. "It's over," Kayla said, her voice low but full of strength. "Your reign ends here." The prince's eyes narrowed, his final breath escaping him in a soft hiss. Then, with a final shudder, he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. A hush fell over the battlefield. The elves who had fought so fiercely for their prince now stood motionless, their will broken. The humans, who had fought for freedom, stood victorious. Kayla lowered her blade, looking around at the battlefield. Rourke and the others were still standing, their faces a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. They had done it. They had defeated the prince, and with him, the long rule of the elves. The Etherheart's power still hummed softly in Kayla's hand, but she knew this was just the beginning. The fight was over. But the world had changed. The humans were no longer slaves. They were free. And Kayla, standing among her people, knew they would never go back to the way things were.